A standard American home weighs around 150 tons. It sits on a thick concrete slab bolted down with steel anchor rods, wrapped in timber framing and brick. It feels permanent, feels heavy, feels like the kind of structure that protects the people inside it. To an EF5 tornado, that home is 3 minutes of raw material. The United States experiences roughly 1,000 tornadoes every single year, about 75% of the global total, killing an average of 80 people and injuring more than 1,500 annually. But the way they kill is almost universally misunderstood, because it isn't the wind, it isn't the funnel, it's the debris. And the most lethal source of that debris is almost always the structure the victim was sheltering inside. So what actually happens when a tornado meets a house, a highway, or a modern city? And why do the structures we instinctively trust for protection keep becoming the things that kill us? The overwhelming majority of tornado fatalities in the United States occur across a broad corridor stretching from Texas through the Deep South and up into the Great Plains. And what makes this corridor so lethal isn't just the weather, it's what's built on top of it. Take Houston, fourth largest city in America, flat as a tabletop, sprawling outward in every direction. Millions of residents living in wood-framed homes bolted to concrete slabs, and virtually none of those homes have basements. Houston sits on waterlogged clay, locals call it gumbo, with a water table so high that excavating a basement becomes a serious engineering project. Building and waterproofing one costs between $37,000 and $150,000. That's the price of a brand new luxury SUV, buried in the dirt. So builders pour a flat concrete pad, frame a house on top of it, and move on. More than 60 million Americans live in the most tornado-prone regions of the country, and the vast majority of them sleep in structures that cannot survive the upper end of what the atmosphere is capable of producing. The people in those homes carry a set of assumptions that feel entirely reasonable. A heavy house on a concrete foundation should be safe. A massive concrete overpass should function as a storm shelter. A downtown skyline of glass and steel should be resilient. And when the tornado sirens sound, that should mean a tornado is actually coming. Every single one of those assumptions is wrong. In the United States, roughly 75% of all tornado warnings turn out to be false alarms. 3 out of 4 times the sirens go off, the storm weakens or passes elsewhere. And it makes sense. Meteorologists err toward caution because the alternative is catastrophically worse. But the consequence is a population trained season after season to treat tornado sirens as background noise. You've heard them before. You've gone to the hallway closet, sat in the dark with your phone, and waited. Nothing happened. You did it again the following month. Nothing. By the 4th or 5th time, the siren becomes a prompt to check the weather app and keep eating dinner. And the sirens themselves were never designed to be heard indoors. Inside a modern, insulated home with the television on, they're frequently inaudible, particularly at 2 in the morning, when some of the most lethal tornadoes have struck. That trained indifference burns through the minutes people need to reach shelter. And when a real tornado is bearing down, those minutes simply do not exist. Even when warnings do reach people, though, the built environment itself can betray the ones inside it. When severe winds hit a modern city, the structures that project the most strength fail first. The wind doesn't bounce off skyscrapers. It channels between them, compressing and accelerating through the gaps. The steel and concrete skeletons survive, engineered to flex. The glass skin wrapped around them does not.
Into this tornado as it moved through the city, there were reports of downed trees and traffic signs. Windows were blown out and there is roof damage.
During the May 2024 Houston derecho, straight-line winds exceeding 100 miles per hour tore through the downtown corridor, and more than 2,500 windows blew out of high-rise towers, heavy architectural panes shattering and cascading from hundreds of feet onto darkened streets below. 8 people died across the county. Among them, a mother of 4 who had stepped outside simply to move her car away from a swaying tree. The tree came down on her. The skyline that looked impervious to the storm had turned the streets beneath it into the most dangerous ground in the city. But the most dangerous misconception about tornado survival doesn't involve buildings at all. It involves the thing most drivers would instinctively run toward. When a tornado is approaching and you're on a highway, the massive concrete overpass ahead looks like a fortress. Thousands of tons of concrete and steel, girders you can wedge yourself between, a heavy roof overhead. It isn't hard to see why the instinct is to stop the car, climb out, and get into that structure. That instinct is almost perfectly wrong. Tornado debris travels horizontally, not vertically. When that horizontal airflow is forced through the narrowed gap beneath an overpass, the concrete compresses it and the wind velocity through the channel spikes. The structure doesn't shield, it funnels. During the May 3, 1999 Oklahoma outbreak, the storm that produced the highest wind speed ever recorded by mobile Doppler radar at 321 miles per hour, faster than a bullet train at cruising speed, motorists across Oklahoma City scrambled under overpasses. 3 people died beneath those bridges, blown from their handholds and ejected into the open debris field. Dozens more were severely injured. As NOAA researcher Dr. Harold Brooks later put it, "We're not so much worried about debris falling on top of you, but worried about stuff blowing sideways at you." A shallow ditch in an open field is measurably safer than a 1,000-ton concrete bridge. That's how completely the physics contradict what feels right. But none of these, the desensitized warnings, the glass avalanche, the overpass trap, come close to what actually kills the vast majority of people inside a tornado. If you want the next one of these to find you, subscribing takes 1 second and means it shows up automatically. Most people picture a tornado killing someone by lifting them off the ground, 200-mile-per-hour wind seizing a body and carrying it into the sky. And while tornadic winds can do extraordinary things, that is almost never the actual cause of death. During the catastrophic April 2011 tornado outbreak across the southeastern United States, 338 people were killed. Researchers documented the mechanism of death for every one of them. Multi-system trauma, blunt force impacts, crush injuries, impalement accounted for 95.6% of all fatalities. Nearly 1 in 4 of the dead had suffered specifically fatal head injuries from flying objects. Not from the wind, from what the wind was carrying. And the primary source of that debris, in case after case, is the victim's own home. The failure follows a chain. It often starts with the garage door, the largest and weakest opening in a residential structure. The door buckles inward under wind pressure, and the moment it does, the full force of the storm enters and pressurizes the interior. The roof lifts. Once the roof is gone, the walls lose their bracing and blow outward. In seconds, the occupants go from sheltering inside a building to standing in the open, surrounded by a rotating cloud of their own furniture, their own wall studs, their own roof trusses, all of it moving at lethal velocity. What lethal velocity actually means, researchers at the National Wind Institute at Texas Tech University test tornado-resistant construction using a pneumatic impact cannon that fires a 15-pound wooden 2x4 at 100 miles per hour. That carries roughly the kinetic energy of a heavy bowling ball dropped from 30 stories directly onto a human chest. In testing, this single piece of lumber punches cleanly through standard residential walls, conventional doors, and brick facades, carrying more than enough residual energy on the other side to instantly kill the person sheltering behind them. That 100-mile-per-hour impact is the standard used to simulate EF5 debris conditions, a single plank among thousands. The event that demonstrates this at its absolute extreme occurred on May 27, 1997, near Jarrell, Texas. A 3/4-mile wide F5 tornado reached the Double Creek Estate subdivision. Storm observers watching its approach described what they call the dead man walking, a multi-vortex structure where several violent subvortices orbit a common center, creating the silhouette of enormous dark legs striding slowly across the horizon. Because the storm was wide, slow-moving, and tracking in an unexpected direction, residents on the ground misjudged its speed, its trajectory, and above all its scale until the outer circulation was already on top of them. And then the tornado effectively stopped. Forward speed dropped to roughly 15 miles per hour, and the full intensity of the vortex sat directly over those 38 homes for approximately 3 minutes. When it passed, the homes were not damaged. They were not collapsed. They were gone. Bare concrete slabs with the anchor bolts sheared flush. The tornado had scoured 18 inches of topsoil from the earth beneath the homes, the depth of a standard bathtub. 3-inch asphalt was ripped off county roads. The structural debris was so finely granulated that virtually no large pieces of the 38 homes were ever recovered. Vehicles turned up hundreds of yards away in open fields, flattened beyond recognition and caked in a dense crust of mud and scoured grass. 27 people died. The arithmetic behind which tornadoes produce this kind of devastation carries its own grim punchline. EF4 and EF5 tornadoes, the violent ones, capable of erasing a neighborhood from its foundation, make up just 1% of all tornadoes that touch down in the United States. That 1% is responsible for 67% of all tornado deaths, and a disproportionate share of those deaths happen at night, when the tornado is invisible, wrapped in rain, and the sirens outside are inaudible through the walls of a sleeping house. Surviving the structural collapse, the debris field, 3 minutes of direct exposure, that would seem like the end of the danger. For a small number of survivors in Joplin, Missouri, it was the beginning. On May 22, 2011, a mile-wide EF5 tornado killed 158 people in Joplin. The extreme winds had aerosolized thousands of tons of soil, decaying wood and organic matter, and the high-velocity debris had driven that contaminated material deep into survivors' bodies through puncture wounds and crush injuries. Embedded in the soil was a fungus called Apophthasomyces trapeziformis, ordinarily harmless, sitting inert in dirt across the central United States. Once mechanically injected into deep tissue by flying shrapnel, it activated with extraordinary speed. The fungus invaded blood vessels, sealed off capillaries, and strangled the circulation to surrounding flesh. The tissue began to die, and because the blood supply was severed, intravenous antifungal medication couldn't reach the infection. Surgeons were forced into repeated debridements, physically carving away rotting flesh and bone in a race to stay ahead of the spreading decay. 13 confirmed cases, 5 deaths, a 38% fatality rate despite aggressive modern medical intervention. One survivor, who had taken a piece of flying debris through his upper right chest, eventually required a completely new titanium ribcage after the fungus destroyed the surrounding skin, muscle, and bone. These were not immunocompromised hospital patients. They were healthy people who survived a tornado, and then, over the following weeks, were consumed by a fungus the storm had driven into their wounds. Every outbreak produces the same question. Why are so many people still living in homes that cannot survive this? The most effective defense has always been the simplest. Get underground, put the earth between the body and the storm. But across Houston, across Texas, across the Deep South, basements essentially don't exist. At the cost of a luxury vehicle per home, they never will, which leaves the houses themselves. After every major outbreak, engineers identify the same failure points. Roofs not clipped to walls, walls not anchored to foundations, garage doors that buckle inward and pressurize the structure. Requiring a continuous load path, metal clips connecting roof to walls and proper bolts connecting walls to the slab allows a home to survive winds up to 135 miles per hour, neutralizing every tornado rated EF2 or below. After the devastating 2013 EF5, Moore, Oklahoma became the first city in the country to adopt tornado-specific residential building codes. The cost increase was $1 per square foot. Moore remains virtually alone. The National Association of Home Builders contends that regulatory costs already add over $130,000 to the price of an average new home, and the implementation of stronger standards is left to a patchwork of local municipalities, most of which choose cheaper construction. In 2024, the International Building Code incorporated tornado-specific design requirements for the first time in history, but only for hospitals, schools, and emergency facilities. Single-family homes, where the majority of tornado deaths occur, remain explicitly outside its scope. The places where people die are still legally permitted to be built the way they've always been built. 3 things, all of which run counter to instinct in some way. Never shelter under a highway overpass. It compresses and accelerates the wind directly into the space you're occupying. If caught on the road with no sturdy building nearby, leave the vehicle, get into the lowest ground available, a ditch, a depression, any drop in elevation, lie flat, and cover your head. It feels exposed. It is measurably safer. Get below ground or into a FEMA-rated safe room. In a violent tornado, standard residential walls are not a barrier. They are future debris. If no underground shelter exists, the lowest floor interior room with no exterior walls is the best available option. In the worst storms, though, the distinction between rooms disappears when the house does. And put on a helmet. A bicycle helmet, a hard hat, anything rigid between the skull and the debris field. Nearly 1 in 4 tornado fatalities involve fatal head injuries from flying objects. A helmet stored in the shelter closet costs almost nothing and directly addresses the most common lethal injury documented across every major tornado outbreak. When the sirens go off, even after 4 false alarms, treat it as real. The cost of being wrong is 10 minutes in a dark closet. The cost of being right is the difference between sheltering inside your house and being buried under it.